The sun shines. Yechin was wearing a straw hat, holding a bamboo basket in one hand, walking slowly along the knee-high river. His feet broke the calm of the river, and the sound of hulala water flowed from time to time. Through the crystal-clear river, Yechin's eyes kept patrolling the pebbles at the bottom of the river, leaning over from time to time, crossing the warm water with his arms, groping on the pebbles. Every time he leaned over, he would pick up a few snails from the pebbles and throw them into the bamboo basket. Snails are common in streams and small rivers in the south. They are shaped like snails, but the surface of their shells is not as smooth as that of snails. Instead, there are many rotating ribs growing, and most of them are smaller in size. But no matter how small a mosquito's legs are, it's still meat. Yechin looked at the snails in the bamboo basket, thinking that he might be able to fry a bowl when he went back, and swallowed softly. Grandma's cooking skills are very good. Take these snails back and rinse them in clean water for an afternoon, and they can be fried at night. I drank 2 bowls of sweet potato porridge this morning. At that time, I felt a little bloated. I ran out and wandered around all morning, sweating a little, and moving. I felt a little hungry. Grandpa often said, "Half and daff children, eat poor people." Yechin himself felt that he had grown physically since the first 2 years, and his appetite was very large. At first, his meal was about the same as his grandparents' and grandparents'. Now, he can eat 1 meal by himself for a day. I should go to the canal in the afternoon to see if there is any loach or rice eel. Yechin stood up straight, wiped the sweat on his face lightly, took off the straw hat from his head, slapped it gently, thinking that he should continue to look for something to add to his meal. July is the dog days. He is dangling by the river, it is cool, and sweating. The red sun was scorching, and the exposed legs, arms, neck and cheeks were all reddened from the sun. Yechin sighed and watched the sparkling water of the river flowing slowly under the sun. He had been thumping in this small river since he was a child. He had read a bit of local chronicles before and said that this river is one of the 3 major sources of the Min River. From the north of Bamyan to the south, winding for hundreds of thousands of miles, I don't know where it entered the sea. Yechin, Yechin! You come up soon! Was straightening up at Yechin, fanning the straw hat as a fan, and suddenly a crisp sound came from the river bank from far away. On the pebble beach by the shore, a young girl in a light green dress covered her forehead with one hand and waved at him gently with the other. How did you come? Yechin turned around, looked towards the shore, laughed suddenly, put the straw hat on his head again, hula-la stepped towards the shore. The sun is so big, can you peel your skin? Yechin lifted his feet out of the river, and walked 2 steps, hurriedly threw the slippers in the basket on the ground, and put them on quickly. The sun is too strong in summer, and every piece of pebbles on the river beach is hot from the sun. Just beat an egg and it won't take long to ripen. Wow, have you picked up so many? Yechin's slippers hadn't been put on yet, and a breeze was blowing by the side. The girl had already ran over, pulled away the bamboo basket on Yechin's arm, and looked at the snails inside. The girl's voice has a southern soft voice, plus a crisp voice, which is especially sweet. Your mother won't let you eat this. Yechin put on some hot slippers, took off the straw hat from his head, and put it on the girl's head. It's so hot, why aren't you at home? I want to eat too. The girl narrowed her mouth slightly, retracted her hand holding the bamboo basket, straightened the straw hat on her head, and then laughed again. Your admission notice is here. The postman sent it directly to the small shop. They didn't know who I was when I went to get it for you. I was admitted to high school. Haha, I only got the 3rd grade in the second half of the year. Yechin tilted his head and glanced at the girl with empty hands. She didn't have a pocket in her dress. His expression was a little nervous, and his voice rose slightly. Chen Zixi, did you take it home for me? The girl nodded briskly. When I got the notice, I just ran into your grandfather, so I gave it to him directly. His old man is very happy. Oh, I asked you to pay attention to it. I brought it back to me directly. Yechin became a little annoyed for a while. Why are you showing it to my grandpa? When the scores came out some time ago, he checked. In all high schools in Xiaoshui County, students are admitted according to their regions and grades. Xiaoshui No. 1 High School directly admitted the top 300 students with the best grades in the county, and the No. 2 High School admitted 100 students from 300 to 400. The rest, according to their grades and regions, were also accepted by several high school students. Admission to township middle schools. Yechin's grades in the high school entrance examination were actually not ideal. He originally estimated that he should be able to enter the first middle school directly, but he was 2 points away from the first middle school score line, and he could only choose to go to the second middle school. Went to the second middle school. Yechin had a headache thinking about this question. To go to high school in the county seat, the tuition cost is much higher than that of junior high school in the town. If he is admitted to the first middle school, he may be able to find that person for the tuition fee, but if he is in the second middle school, he is really not sure. Thinking of that black face, Yechin would rather not go to school, and go to work in other provinces with others next year. What should I do then? Chen Zixi pouted and looked at Yechin's expression. Did I do something wrong? Forget it. Yechin shook his head. He wasn't so ignorant. He didn't say a word of thanks for helping him. It's just that Grandpa knew that he had been admitted to the second high school. This matter was a bit troublesome. Originally, he wanted to go to that person to ask if the tuition fee was paid. If he didn't, he would just shirk with Grandpa and Grandma and said that he didn't take the exam. Up. Hearing Yechin's words, the girl under the straw hat showed a hint of sly on her face, and then she whispered, Yechin. Well, what's the matter? If you can, you still have to go to high school and go to college later. The girl was a little bit hesitant, and finished a sentence, but she exhaled silently. What, say so far? Yechin patted the straw hat on the opponent's head. Go back and go back, otherwise you will be tanned like me. Oh. The girl nodded gently. Yechin walked ahead with the bamboo basket on his back. The pebble beach is not easy to walk. It is a river beach, not a smooth and neat tree-lined trail in a city park. Wearing slippers and sandals, if you don't pay attention to raising your feet, you can easily bump your toes. But he grew up, and if the pebbles were not baked too hot, he could run barefoot. After 2 steps, Yechin paused suddenly, turned his head and glanced at Chen Zixi, who was pacing carefully, and instantly laughed again. Bring your hand. Yechin stretched out his hand towards Chen Zixi behind. I can walk by myself. Hurry up, who had knocked his feet for a week last time. After crossing the pebble beach, the two of them swayed along the reeds and quickly returned to a small road outside the river dam on the bank. There are large farmland on both sides of the small road. The rice fields are green. Occasionally, there are a lot of headings that stretch out from the green leaves. There are also several golden rice fields farther away. A little further ahead, there are houses scattered high and low. Some people have built new houses. The white tiles are still very eye-catching under the high light, even if they are far away. Others are mostly ordinary red brick houses or tamped soil houses. In recent years, many people in the village have earned some money by working outside, and many of them have demolished old houses and built new ones when they become rich. Shangyun village is a village below Xiali town. The development of Xiaoshui County in recent years lags a lot behind the surrounding counties and cities. In the early years, it was a large grain-producing county. In an era when many people were unable to get enough food, naturally attracted many people around to run to Xiaoshui County. In the past few years, the economy of other places has gradually risen, and the income from farming has been meager. Instead, people in Xiaoshui County have begun to work and do business in the north and south. This is also the source of Yechin's idea of going out to work with other people. If he wants to go to high school, he will have to continue to spend money. It's better to come out early to lighten some of the burden. Yechin, look at that. The two were walking on the small road from Heba to the village. Yechin lowered his head and wondered what to do with his grandfather when he waited. Suddenly, Chen Zixi's arm was gently pulled down by Chen Zixi. What? Yechin looked in the direction of Chen Zixi's fingers. Not far from the path was a courtyard with a tumaturai wall. A bayberry tree protruded from the yard. The full bayberry was hung among the green branches, bright red. Drop. You want to eat Yang Mei, but Uncle Yan will not be there. Yechin stood on tiptoe and looked into the courtyard. The iron gate outside the courtyard was closed, and the courtyard was quiet. I'll go back to Chuanshan to pick it for you. Chuanshan's bayberry is bigger and sweeter than this one. Go back. This season is the peak season for bayberry. Yechin also goes to Chuanshan on the other side of the river to pick bayberry every year. The unfinished grandmother will be dried into dried bayberry. Add some sugar and put it in a glass jar, enough for him to eat as a snack for several months. After 2 steps, Yechin turned his head and found that Chen Zixi hadn't moved his footsteps. Yu looked at him at www.yuyuganshu.com and looked at him with blinking eyes. It's all right, I'm afraid of you. Yechin is a little helpless, he has been like this since he was a child. Hold it. Walked back and handed the bamboo basket in his hand to Chen Zixi. Yechin turned directly outside the wall, took a few steps to run up, and turned up. He has a good physical fitness. When he slipped out of the junior high school, he could step on a wall of more than 3 meters high with a few feet. This kind of small courtyard wall of more than 2 meters for a farmhouse is even more of a problem. Climbed up the courtyard wall, reached out and carefully pulled down a branch full of bayberry, just picked one, and suddenly a dog bark sounded in the small courtyard. A big yellow dog crawling in the shade of the tree, suddenly its ears trembled, noticed the movement, and rushed towards the courtyard wall. Ouch! Yechin was taken aback by the big yellow dog, and when he turned around, he jumped off the courtyard wall. The big yellow dog in the yard barked repeatedly, got out of the iron gate at the entrance of the yard, and chased Yechin directly. Again. Yechin watched the big yellow dog get out of the yard, and turned around and ran without even thinking about it. The Chinese pastoral dogs in the farmhouse are usually running around. If you usually meet them around, don't run and stay still, they are basically fine. But he just overcame someone's fence, it won't work if he doesn't run. While running, she turned her head and shouted in the direction of Chen Zixi, I'm going back first. You will send the basket to my house later. Chen Zixi, who has been standing quietly by the side of the road, suddenly laughed out loud and raised his hand gently, Yechin, come on. Under the bright sunshine, the shouts of the teenager, the barking of the big yellow dog, and the laughter of the girl like a silver bell, spilled all over the floor. Ling ling. The crisp bells rang from far away. In the early morning of summer, the sun is warm and the morning breeze has the smell of vegetation. Yechin, where are you going? I'm going to town. On the rural road from Shangyun village to Xiali town, Yechin leaned on the head of the car with one hand, touched the ground with his left foot, and greeted 2 teenagers who were also riding bicycles. Yechin, did you pass the second high school? Yesterday I heard that your grandpa took your admission notice and wandered around the village committee. Is a tall and thin boy who is riding a beautiful variable speed bicycle. At this time, it is called a racing car in the villages, towns, and villages. Next to him was a slightly shorter teenager, riding a brand new lady's bicycle. Yechin smiled, instead of answering the topic, he asked the 2 of them, Zhang Jianping, Wang Wu, where are you 2 going? Go to town too. The tall and thin young man Zhang Jianping paused and scratched his head. Something goes to school. Go to school. Yechin was slightly surprised. Everyone had graduated from junior high school and had been on vacation for a long time. Why did he go to school at this time? Oh, there is something hidden. Wang Wu curled his lips and pointed to Zhang Jianping. His dad called back and asked him to go to high school and asked him to inquire about buying a number 1 middle school or Sanyang. How much does the middle school cost? Yekin understood this immediately. Xiashui number 1 middle school and Sanyang town, where there is a high school, Sanyang middle school not only recruits students who pass the test, but also has a high school entrance examination score that is too low and can be bought by paying extra. Yechin doesn't know exactly how much it will cost. In short, it's a huge amount, and not many people are willing to spend a lot of money each year. Let's go. Yechin lightly stepped his foot and stepped on the pedal of the bicycle to start first. Yechin, your car is so old that it jingles, can you catch up with us? Zhang Jianping and Wang Wu followed, and the three of them walked side by side. Looking at Yechin's Phoenix 28 bar, Zhang Jianping shouted with a grin. Yes, wait a minute, you won't be able to catch up with us. Wang Wu also yelled. Although his is not a racing car, the lady's bicycle is light and does not take much effort. The comparison of young people is actually the same whether it is urban or rural. Compared with Yechin's Phoenix 28 Dagong, the two bicycles are undoubtedly more fashionable. In the 3 years of junior high school, whoever wants to have a bicycle like this will not be the focus, but it is more or less fascinating. The Toei ink bars that Yechin rides have more than 10 years of history. They were bought by my uncle when he was not married before. Some of the peeled paint parts have some mottled rust, and there is a wash on the back seat. Wrapped in a clean snakeskin bag. For variable speed bicycles, Yechin had been particularly eager to start from the 6th grade until the junior high school in the town. Thinking about the uncle or the sister-in-law, or the grandpa who would really give him one, if he rode such a bicycle, the speed should be too fast. But he himself knows that this kind of thing will never only happen in a dream. The daydream in his mind flashed, watching Zhang Jianping and Wang Wu suddenly accelerate from their sides and ride forward quickly. Yechin suddenly laughed. Holding the handlebars tightly with both hands, the person arched slightly, his buttocks lifted from the seat cushion, and the weight of his entire body began to fall on the bicycle pedals. The Toei ink bars of the bicycle started with a heavier foot, and Yekin seemed to exhaust every effort. After several consecutive kicks, Yechin's feet changed faster and faster, and the squeak of the flywheel chain suddenly became fast and urgent. Bell bell bell, the crisp bicycle ringtone becomes more and more crisp. Damn, he can fly. But 4 or 5 minutes later, on the winding Huangtu country road, two teenagers riding variable speed bicycles and brand new ladies' bicycles panting, looking at the creaking but fast disappearing in front of the Phoenix 28 bars. For a while, he shook his head and sighed. Xiali town is the northernmost town in Xiashui County. Today is not a day to go to the market, but the main streets in the middle of the town are still quite lively. Especially in the section of the vegetable market, there are many vendors along the street. The cries of chickens and ducks are intertwined with the sounds of various vehicles and pedestrians crossing the street from time to time. Yechin carefully rode his bicycle across the street, and soon came to a street behind the town government. The town has developed rapidly in the past few years. This old street, which was still dilapidated in Yekin's first grade, has now built rows of three-story buildings with white tiles. The regular asphalt road on the ground, the first floor is the storefront, and the second and third floors live. There are still a few places in the distance that were rebuilt under planning after the demolition and relocation. They are incomparable with the cities and counties, but they are quite regular and can be seen. It may be because the time is still early, except for one that sells breakfast along the street, the other rolling shutters are tightly closed. In front of the shop closest to the corner of the street, Yechin jumped off the bicycle, leaned the corner of the bicycle aside, and took off the cloth bag from the back seat of the car. Raised his head and looked at the building in front of him. The security door on the second and third floors next to the rolling door was closed and hidden. The residents who wanted to come upstairs had already gotten up. Yechin stood in front of the door and took a breath. Instead of pushing the door directly in, he knocked on the metal panel of the anti-theft door. Who? Soon a voice came from inside. The door was opened by a chubby middle-aged woman. Looking at Yechin standing outside, she was slightly stunned, and then she put a smile on her face. Yechin, it's you, why are you here? Yet. Yechin nodded silently. This middle-aged woman was his stepmother Wu Fengqin, but after so many years, he couldn't say anything. There are some dried fish here. Grandma asked me to bring them and add some dishes to you. Yechin passed the package in his hand and didn't speak much after entering the door. There are many streams in Xiashui County. These dried fish are basically powered by Yekin carrying a battery along the small river ditch. The equipment of the electric fish is also simple, that is, a battery with a metal conductive pole and a dip net. If you sit down, I will pour you a glass of water. Wu Fengqin took the package in Yechin's hand, and the smile on her face became close. No trouble. Yechin waved his hand. He didn't want to stay here for a long time, so he took the lead. I was admitted to the second high school, and my father and grandma are getting older, so I want to ask if you want to help me. Pay some tuition and I will pay you back in a few years. When Wu Fengqin heard the words high school and tuition, the smile on her face suddenly froze. She was taken aback, and then she gave a dry smile. I was admitted to high school. Second middle school. Second middle school. Yechin hesitated a little, then replied in a low voice. That didn't pass the entrance examination. Wu Fengqin seemed to relax a little while listening. Well, let me tell your dad. She turned her head and took the dried fish that Yekin had given into the kitchen. Did not pour water, but went upstairs. Who is here? Yechin was about to sit down on the stool in the guest hall when he heard a male voice upstairs. Although it was upstairs and downstairs, the voice was still clearly audible. After hearing the man's voice, Yechin almost subconsciously left his seat and approached the stairs unconsciously. It's Yechin here. Wu Fengqin's voice followed. What is he doing? The nonchalant voice of the man talking upstairs sounded again. He was admitted to high school, come here to ask for tuition. Oh, the male voice dragged a long pause, seemed to ponder for a long time before asking as if he was half a beat, 1 or 2. Number 1 middle school. Wu Fengqin chuckled, her voice raised a little high. It's not bad to be able to go to number 2 middle school. It's not bad to go to number 1 middle school. Hehe, your Ye family doesn't have that good feng shui. Second middle school seems to have nothing to do with it. The male voice didn't seem to hear Wu Fengqin's sarcasm at all, but spoke slowly. The reputation of Xiashui number 2 middle school in the past few years is not good. There are sayings in the county that there are talents in 1 middle school and hooligans in the second middle school. In the past 2 or 3 years, it has been replaced by an experienced principal and vigorously rectified the atmosphere. After introducing a lot of excellent teachers, it gradually got better. However, this is the case. Such a bad impression cannot be changed overnight. What do you think? Wu Fengqin's voice seemed to be a bit complaining. I tell you, Xian will be in the second half of the year, and my elementary school teacher's salary is not enough. If you start this, it's so big, high school for 3 years, every year. University, Xiashui number 2 middle school is able to get a bachelor's degree, and Yechin, let's say it, is high school. The city spends a lot of money. I know. The male voice was slightly excited. I don't have money, and I can't pay. There is nothing to study in the second middle school. 15th and 16th people, when I was so old, they all earn their own food. I didn't ask you to say so absolutely. Wu Fengqin's tone softened a little when he heard the man's excitement. I mean, give it a little bit, so that your relatives don't look good. What are you going to give? The man upstairs became more and more intense. Their father and son, and their brothers and sisters, have been cursing for so many years, so let them continue to curse. I don't rely on my grandparents and sisters in this life. My brother is living well, and I don't expect my children to provide for the elderly. They live their lives, I live mine. The voices upstairs continued, but Yachin couldn't hear it at all when he heard this. He stood at the top of the stairs, clenched his fists, his body was tight, and his hair seemed to stand up all over his body. The line of sight in front of him seemed to be a bit blurred, just like that. I don't know how long he stood. Yachin didn't wake up suddenly until the sound of pattering footsteps came down the stairs again. Wu Fengqin, who came down from the upper floor, saw Yachin standing at the top of the stairs. She was taken aback for a moment. Then she smiled and shouted in harmony, "Yachin, eat here at noon." Yachin turned around abruptly and ran out of the door. "Yachin, Yachin!" Wu Fengqin hurriedly yelled twice. When she left the house, the boy in the blue undershirt had already stepped on the bicycle and rode away without looking back. On the way back, the sun had already risen, and the yellow dirt roads were a little pale by the blazing sun. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. On a steep and long slope, Yachin got out of the car and wiped his face with an undershirt. His eye sockets were slightly red, and it was not known whether sweat or something got in his eyes. The temperature is high, and the weather is hot, but Yachin's body is trembling slightly, and only feels a chill all over his body. This is the third time I went up to ask for tuition. The first two were the first and third grades of middle school. In those 2 times, my uncle took him. He was distracted. I don't know what my uncle talked to that person, but I went back. On the way, my uncle's face is always not pretty. And this time, he heard it downstairs. He didn't know if it was deliberately told to him, or if he unintentionally came up with his inner thoughts, but these are not important anymore. He remembered his uncle's earnest words before going out to work, "Yachin, you have to fight for your breath. You don't have parents to care about, you still have grandparents, and uncle." There is also the phrase that grandpa often said to him before, "As long as you can read it, we will sell the house and also offer you to study." Comparing the two, and looking at the man who didn't even show his face downstairs, Yachin only felt sick. "What?" Yachin suddenly shouted loudly on the road. The suffocation that squeezed in his chest seemed to make people breathless. "Yeming Wang, you have the ability to live, but don't have the ability to support. What a man are you? Wu Fengqin, you are a great elementary school teacher. I will never be looked down upon by you for a lifetime. I don't want to go to school and go to work. Yachin, you have to stand up." The chain of the bicycle snorted, the gears turned fast, and the tanned yellow mud road. The teenager pedaled the bicycle vigorously, sometimes venting loudly, and sometimes gritted his teeth. The gurgling small river rushed past. At the intersection of Shangyun Village Bridge, a black Toyota Crown was parked at the intersection. The golden sunlight fell on the streamlined metal body, which looked particularly dazzling. Compared with many popular Jetta, Alto, Santana, and other models at this time, the Crown is undoubtedly quite eye-catching. Especially in places like Shangyun Village in Xiashui County, even if many people don't recognize the car logo, the rounded car model and length can make many people who have never seen the world feel an impact. The first few years of the millennium were also a few years when a large number of people in Xiashui County began to flow out. They ranged from floor tiles to factories, working in factories, and opening grocery store food stalls, to entrepreneurs, factories, contracting projects, and companies. Some people were discounted. Someone made a fortune. Many people are no longer staring at the Oniaker 3-point land in front of them, but taking one by one, and they start to run outside in groups. Trees move to die, people move to live. Ancient and modern is not the case. Chen Yunbo was sitting in the driver's seat with the window down. He had already greeted several acquaintances one after another. He was quite satisfied with the enviable eyes of others, or occasionally sighing about the great talents of the Chen brothers. To be honest, there have been a lot of people going out in Xiaoshui County these years, but most of them are still at the bottom of the city. Like their brothers, they have really jumped out of their original circles, really few. In the past few days, he has basically been wandering around the county government, eating one after another, pushing cups and changing cups, all wanting them to return to their hometown for investment. The geographical location of Xiaoshui County is embarrassing. Not to mention the train and airport, even the high-speed has to wait for the planning to be planned. Moreover, there are too few things that can be obtained in the local area of Xiaoshui County. Several large taxpayers in the county are all big cities. The type of biochemical plant that is allowed to enter and pollutes a lot, for a period of time, it is foul-smelling before it enters the plant area. I will come back later. Chen Yunbo rubbed his temples and sighed silently. He touched the cigarette in his trouser pocket and glanced at his wife who was sticking her head out of the window next to him. He pursed his mouth and hands again. Slowly retracted back. Zixi, what are you doing there? Hurry up and get in the car and go. Huang Hongying poked her head out from the co-pilot, looked at the two figures standing under the camphor tree at the intersection of the bridge, and shouted loudly. Mom, wait a minute. The girl's voice floated over, but the person didn't move. What are you waiting for in such a hot day? Huang Hongying yelled dissatisfiedly. Hey, what are you anxious about? Just let her talk about it. Chen Yunbo looked a little unsightly. They were all neighbors and villagers. His wife was bluffing, doing too much, and it was really ugly. Tell me, we haven't been at home all these years. What do you know, you? Huang Hongying glared back at her husband without showing any weakness. He was in the county for a few days now, so he didn't have a home. Fire. Chen Yunbo frowned, feeling a little helpless for a while, but didn't think deeply about where his wife's nameless fire came from. Rather, he thought that his eldest daughter stayed in his hometown to follow his parents since he was a child. Although there is no shortage of food and clothing, and the economy is getting more and more affluent, he is indeed a little guilty in his heart. He also understands his wife's mentality, so he can only persuade him softly, the children are young, so worry about you. We have not been at home for the past few years, and we have split up with Zixi. Anyway, after going to Linan, it will be possible to celebrate the holidays in the future. Come back. On the side of, Chen Zixi was dressed in a light-colored dress with his hands behind his back. He looked at Yaqin's panting running, and his face suddenly smiled. Sorry, I almost missed it. Yaqin huffed his breath, touched the fine beads of sweat on his forehead, and opened a plastic bag he was carrying. Hey, do you see it? Yan mi. Chen Zixi passed through the mouth of the bag, looked at the contents, and exclaimed with joy, Yaqin, when did you go pick it? Chuan Shan. The bag is filled with bright and plump bayberry, some with broken green branches and leaves. It can be seen that the picking may be a little rush. Yet. Ye Qinping recovered his breath, nodded lightly, and didn't explain much, just handed the bag in his hand to Chen Zixi. Chen Zixi draws an arc at the corner of his mouth, his eyes narrowed slightly, like a crescent moon. Chuan Shan is a slightly ship-shaped mountain with two pointed ends in the middle of the opposite bank of the river. She has been there before. It is not too far, but it is definitely not close. It's only 9 o'clock in the morning, and according to the round trip and the time to pick Yang Mei, Yaqin said that he would get up at about 5 or 6 o'clock. She did not immediately reach out to pick up the bag of bayberry in Yekin's hand, but turned her head and opened the small backpack behind her, and took out a small book-thick box from it. What is this? Yaqin looked a little weird. He didn't expect Chen Zixi to equip him with a gift, took the paper box, weighed it lightly, and reached out to take it apart. Oh, wait a minute. Chen Zixi quickly pressed Yaqin, you can't dismantle it now, you can dismantle it after I get in the car and leave. Good, good. Yaqin stopped his movements, grinned, and smiled as always. Looking at Chen Zixi's mother in the car in front of her, she poked her head out from time to time, looked this way, and immediately waved her hand gently. "It's getting hot, you can get in the car as soon as possible." The girl's voice fell slightly, and she didn't speak any more. Quietly took the bag of bayberry in Yekin's hand, threw the backpack on one side of his shoulder, turned his head and walked towards the back seat of the car. Yechin looked at the girl's back, pursed his lips, and exhaled silently. Suddenly, Chen Zixi, who had already opened the door and was about to get into the back seat, paused, did not look back, just turned his back to him, raised his right hand high, and swayed gently. "Yechin, come on." For a moment, Yechin laughed. That is his action. Yu reading www.yuuganshu.com. The engine sounded, Yechin watched the car get on the bridge and went away. He stood blankly for a few minutes, shook his head, turned and walked towards his home. The door was concealed. Grandparents were not at home at this time. They probably went to the vegetable field or somewhere. Yechin got up very early today and didn't pay much attention. Under the mulberry tree at the door, Yekin pulled a low stool and sat down. There was a chirping call from the tree, and occasionally a gust of wind blew by, and people in the shade of the tree were particularly cool and cozy. Yechin looked at the small paper box with a beautiful bow in his hand, and the corners of his mouth slightly cocked unconsciously. Chen Zixi also shared some things with him from time to time since he was a child. When he was very young, it was a toy. When he was a little older, it might be gadgets and gifts bought in Linzhou, but it seemed the first time to be packaged in such a careful manner. Took apart the ribbons of the paper box and saw a black notebook. "This Nizai." Yechin looked a little funny at the black notebook. The notebook was black soft leather with a metal button on the back. It looked like a lot of business and office use. It was relatively high-end. Opening the metal button, Yechin flipped through the notebook. Suddenly a few red pieces of paper slipped down. Yechin was stunned when he looked at the red filmmakers, and then saw a white card among the red ones with words written on it. Yechin held it in his hand and touched the card lightly. Seriously looked up. The word is not very beautiful, but it is written very clearly one by one, and it says, "This is my New Year's money, you remember to pay me back in the future. Yechin, you must go to high school, and then go to university." At the end of the card there is a small clenched fist painted in watercolor. "Yechin, come on." The canteen of Xiashui No. 2 Middle School is in a two-story building behind the teaching building. Compared with the teaching building, the school canteen opened last year is relatively new, with clean windows. It is one of the landmark buildings of No. 2 Middle School. This is one of the main things that Xiashui No. 2 Middle School did after the new principal took office. Quite a few of the students in Xiashui No. 2 Middle School are county day students. The county entrance examination failed to pass the top 300 or did not pay for it. Those who enter the first middle school are basically in the second middle school. The number of boarding students from the following townships is not particularly large, so the school has not done a good job in the student cafeteria before. In the past, most of the second middle school students had long-term meals in various small restaurants at the entrance of the school, not to mention the high cost, and the sanitary conditions were many and poor. A few years ago, the management of Xiashui No. 2 Middle School was a mess. People from all walks of life often enter the campus at will, and some small gangsters outside often fight with the students in the school. This is also one of the reasons why some people disapproved after Yechin was admitted to the second high school. After the millennium, when the principal was changed and the management became stricter, it gradually became a little better. After Yechin entered the school, he felt that, whether it was compared with the rumored Xiashui No. 2 Middle School, or his middle school in Xiali town, it was actually much better in all aspects. Entered the canteen, and the smell of various dishes and rice hit his mouth and nose for a while. Yechin swallowed, and glanced at the huge canteen. It may be that the peak period has passed, and many windows in the cafeteria have closed. Rows of white strips were fixed in front of the dining table, and there were not many people left. There were only 3 or 5 girls who were talking and eating small meals. An aunt wearing an apron in the aisle stopped the cleaning truck and was cleaning up the residue and stains on the tabletop. After Yechin entered the school, he once came to the cafeteria to ask about work-study programs, as well as to collect plates, but the high school cafeteria were contracted to private individuals. The school has not let go of this opening. He has not asked a few times. People care about it. As for subsidies for poor students, not to mention, in Xiashui too, he is in economic distress, but there are many people who have worse conditions than him. And the freshman just entered school, he didn't know what to do for a while. Groped for a while in his trouser pocket, took out a few banknotes, and walked to a window. The school had a meal card when enrolled, but the meal card required a deposit of 30 yuan. He was not willing to use cash for a while. After all, the middle school in Xiashui County is not a later one, nor does it start all-in-one cards like many universities. Ordered a portion of rice and 2 greens, Yechin held the plate, found a place, and started eating quickly. The food in the cafeteria tastes average, far worse than the small restaurants outside, let alone grandma's craftsmanship, but it is better than the large quantity and enough rice, so he can eat enough. After coming out of the cafeteria, Yechin did not go back to the dormitory for lunch. He has never had the habit of taking a lunch break. He will open the school building again and begin to preview the content of the afternoon. 3 classes in the afternoon: chemistry, physics, and physical education. Chemistry. Fortunately, the first and second chapters talk about more theories. Yechin basically did not feel any difficulties when he previewed in advance. By the second physics class, he felt a little confused by what the physics teacher with a fat body and thick eyes was talking about. The relationship between the speed of the linear motion speed and the displacement and time, he looked very simple when he previewed, but when he was told by the physics teacher, he had a lot of questions. He knows himself very well. In junior high school, he spent a lot of effort. Compared with the few students in the class who listened casually in the classroom and did not need to do exercises, he could get good results. There was a significant gap between him. The bell rang until the end of get out of class. Yechin scratched his head and sat in the position, still not understanding some of the content that the other party said in the class. It's just that he didn't go up to ask the teacher directly after class. Since childhood, he has been used to solving problems on his own. If he encounters something that he doesn't understand or doesn't understand clearly, he will try his best to delve into it and make it clear. Third period. In the middle of the playground of Xiashui No. 2 Middle School, all the students of grade 1 of high school are standing in 4 rows. Standing in the third position on the far right of the 4th row, Yechin was lowering his head, holding a 32-volume exercise book, flipping through it from time to time, and suddenly he was hit by someone on his shoulder. Yechin, what are you looking at? Damn, you are too exaggerated. The boy who bumped Yechin's shoulder lightly was a boy with thick eyebrows and big eyes, named Yu Hao. He was at the left and right tables next to Yechin. This would be close to Yechin's side, watching him flip through the class just now. Class notes, suddenly cried out in surprise. I didn't understand a bit just now. Yechin tilted his body slightly, rolled the exercise book in his hand into a cylinder, stuffed it into his trouser pocket, and replied faintly. Today's talk is quite simple. Wow, Yechin, you worked so hard, no wonder your grades are so good. Yu Hao sighed. There was a ranking at the beginning of school, except that the top 300 in the county went to the first middle school, and the next 300,400 were in the second middle school. Among these people, Yechin was away from the first middle school score. The difference of 2 points is considered to be the top 5 scores in the 2 key classes in the second middle school, that is, the top 5 in age. Of course, whether it can be maintained in the future depends on the ranking of the high school exams. Sun Yuguang curled his lips. He was a little disgusted with how Hao yelled. He is Yaqin's table mate. Over the past week or so, I can see that Yaqin has worked very hard in his studies. The feeling of repeated memorization on the transcript really made him a little speechless. Especially how long the school is now. If you can do exercises under the control of the lectures in the class, you don't need to have class notes in the last physical education class. Hard-working classmates have never seen him since he was a child. There are a few classmates who have passed the first middle school entrance examinations in junior high school who are particularly hard-working, but like Yaqin, he really makes him feel a little pretentious. The teacher is coming. Someone in the line suddenly shouted. Yaqin looked up in the direction of the sound. On the other side of the playground, a tall woman in blue sportswear was trotting towards everyone. Yu reading www.yuuganashu.com. The woman looks like she should be about 26 or 17 years old, with a ponytail. Although she is trotting, she doesn't feel like a girl in Yaqin's memory when she runs awkwardly. On the contrary, she stretches generously, especially light, with a rhythm sense. Mr. Yan is pretty. Good figure, but the skin is a little dark. Black? Isn't that called wheat color? I heard that Mr. Yan used to be an athlete. Really? Didn't you say that you graduated from normal school? A low voice of discussion sounded in the team, especially the boys in the back 2 rows, and suddenly became excited. Sorry, classmates, I just had something wrong, I'm late. The woman trot to the front of the team, her face flushed without panting, and all the students from the first grade class who had just lined up beckoned and apologized with a clear and hearty voice. It's okay, Teacher Yan, the bell just rang, we are too active. Someone in the front row of boys shouted loudly. Yes, Teacher Yan's physical education class, can we not be active? Yu Hao, who was standing next to Yaqin, echoed with a grin. There was another low laughter in the crowd. In Xiaoshui County, whether it is elementary school or junior high school or current high school, everyone has encountered a lot of female teachers since childhood, but young female physical education teachers are really sharp and angular, which can be said to be quite rare. Especially this one standing in front of everyone at this moment. Although he is not particularly beautiful, his limbs are slender and fit, and the brows and eyes are filled with the breath of sunny movement. In a small place like Xiaoshui County, this physical education teacher is completely different from the stubborn female teacher in many students' perceptions, or the sickly girls in the class, which is especially attractive to teenagers. Yan Ning glanced lightly at a few booing boys in the team, and didn't get angry, just patted his hands lightly and focused everyone's attention. Okay, stop making trouble, everyone follow the cue and run around the playground twice. Yan Ning pointed to the last row of the team, next to Yaqin. Yu Hao, who had just yelled loudest, continued, Yu Hao, right, your teacher Zhang told me that you are a sports committee member, so start from your side. Take the lead, let's go. Okay. Yu Hao's face suddenly raised a smile, and beckoned to Yaqin, Sun Yuguang and other boys behind him, warm up and ran away. At this time, the last row of the team just started to move, and several shouts of Teacher, I want to ask for leave. Teacher, I'm not feeling well. Shouts followed. Yan Ning looked at the girls coming out of the queue, sighed softly, a little helpless, but she didn't say much, just nodded gently, letting the person calling for leave to stand aside. It's really uninteresting to be a physical education teacher in high school. It's not as good as junior high school. At least because of the high school entrance examination, students in the second and third grades of junior high school can concentrate on it, but in high school, the college entrance examination does not take physical education. Occasionally she gets serious and takes a few sessions of high jump, long jump, and sprint test. Except for a small number of boys who are interested, most of them just pass it in a perfunctory manner. Of course, letting the students move freely, playing basketball and badminton, is still very happy. She has been a high school physical education teacher for more than a year and has gained experience. Except for the few physical education students she brought, she generally no longer formulates any physical training plans. There are many things that she can't do in high school. This is to cultivate some habits and interests. It is more to give students who are locked in the classroom all day a relaxing time. In each class, students are allowed to trot a few laps, and occasionally introduce some sports and small knowledge, and at other times, students are basically allowed to move freely on the playground. One class a week, by the end of the second semester of high school or the third year of high school, basically all of them are cancelled. The messy footsteps sounded. The solace of the shoes rustled on the runway covered with cinders, and Yachin followed Yu Hao behind him. From entering the runway, his body was running slowly and subconsciously. What he was thinking of was just a few places that he didn't understand smoothly. From time to time, the content of the first class of chemistry in the afternoon appeared, the after-school exercises that should be done in the evening self-study and the content of tomorrow's preview. A circle, follow a circle. In a blink of an eye, Yachin just came back to his senses, feeling that his breathing was a bit quicker, and he didn't think about any messy exercises in his mind, but found that the whole team had stopped. 2 laps of 400 meter jogging are easy for young people of this age who have a certain amount of exercise. Of course, there are also some boys and girls who lack exercise. After everyone else gathered in the queue, they sparsely panted and ran back. After waiting for the team to stand slantingly again, Yan Ning clapped her hands gently again. Okay, let's move freely. Boys who want to play basketball can go to the badminton court by themselves. Oh. I'm exhausted. I can finally rest. Let's play halftime together. It's been a long time since I played badminton. Go and see if there are any shots in the sports room. In the middle of the playground of Xiashui No. 2 Middle School, the students of grade 1 who were barely able to stand in a queue in order of height, disappeared in a flash, and went all the way to every corner of the playground. Assemble before get out of class, don't run around. Yan Ning looked at the team that hula-la scattered around and exhorted again. Her physical education class is the last one of the day. If we don't emphasize it, these students who have just crossed the threshold of high school may be gone. After all the students had dispersed, Yan Ning did not continue to stand in the middle of the playground, but walked to a shady area in the corner of the playground. 2 boys in shorts and sports vests are twisting their hips and doing stretching exercises. These are the 2 physical education students she is now leading, and they just got together a little bit late to talk to them. In Xiashui No. 2 Middle School, or all middle schools in Xiashui County, there are really too few students who are really willing to practice physical education, much less than those who study art. One is too hard, and the other is the concept of most people now. It hasn't turned around yet, there are only a few people in Xiashui No. 2 Middle School. Mr. Yan, do you want to test now? A boy with a flat head who was skipping rope saw Yan Ning approaching. He stopped and greeted him. The boy with a flat head is not tall, with broad shoulders, and his arms and thighs are much thicker than ordinary boys. At a glance, he can feel the sense of power that exceeds his peers. Wait again, let's talk about it after class is over. Aren't those few still in class now? Yan Ning faintly replied, then glanced at the boy in front of him. His brows frowned slightly. Li Jianchao, you have grown flesh again during summer vacation, and if you continue like this, you don't practice any running anymore. You can just throw shots. Teacher Yan, I have muscles. I practice strength during summer vacation. I squat now. The flat-headed boy raised his strong arms and defended. Okay, I'll see how you practiced during the summer vacation later. Have you improved? Yan Ning interrupted the boy with a flat head, shook her head, and then beckoned to another boy who was doing squats and leapfrogs on flat ground. Lu Yijin, stop, you come first, and I will tell you how to warm up. Some points. Okay, teacher. The boy jumped up from the ground and jumped a few steps to Yan Ning's side. He is a bit taller than the flat-headed Li Jianchao, but he doesn't have that bulk, and his hair is messy, which may be due to long-term exercise, and his body is well-balanced and powerful. Yan Ning stood between the two, gently breaking the fingers between the left and right hands. Generally, before a formal game, stretching is a very important preparation activity. The more prepared you are, the better your body will come out. Don't laugh, don't take it too seriously. The warm-up activity before the game has a decisive influence on your final results, and it can also prevent injuries. In the future, if you want to do intense exercise, it is best to be fully active. It seems that the afternoon is better now. After a day's time, the body is basically active in the evening. Sometimes in the morning or in the morning game, whether the body can be completely warmed up is a very important point. I see, Teacher Yan. Seeing Yan Ning's words seriously, the two boys stood up straight and replied, but their facial muscles twitched slightly, as if they always wanted to laugh. Yan Ning also knows that it is probably due to gender and age. The students are not afraid of her. When she talks about some training knowledge, she always loves to do something wrong there. She is also used to it, just glanced at the two indifferently. Raised his index finger gently, 200m speed endurance run, 10 times. Hey! No way! Boss Yan, don't be so cruel. Yes, this is killing us, don't we have to test it later? The two of them collapsed in an instant, and shouted loudly. Hey! What did you call me? Yan Ning snorted lightly, and his eyes swept across a few people again. No, teacher, you got it wrong. At this time, the novels of a certain Hong Kong and Taiwan martial arts writer swept the mainland. Before the two young gangsters in Yangzhou followed them, they were followed by a speaking boss. Although the words are different, the sound is the same. The only ones who practice physical education in Xiashui No. 2 Middle School are these. If Yan Ning, a physical education teacher who has just come to No. 2 Middle School, is willing to take them, they just want to practice and can't find the right person to guide them. Yes, although every one of them occasionally makes a little joke, they still respect the female teacher in front of them for being willing to work hard to help them. Normally physical education, or I heard that if other students disrespect Yan Ning, they would inevitably be warned by them. Okay, you first run laps to warm up your body, and when my class is over and there are people, come over and give you a test. Yan Ning said briefly, and saw two big dumbbells on the ground being lifted out of the gym by someone unknown. Be careful with the equipment training, don't get hurt. After explaining several sports students, Yan Ning slowly wandered around the playground again. This is the second physical education class in the first year of high school. Although she allows everyone to move freely, she is still in her class after all, and people still have to stare at it. On the big playground, most of the boys crowded around the basketball court in groups, a few played badminton with girls, and the rest were chatting in twos and threes hiding in the shade of the trees next to the playground. This is the normal state of physical education in township middle schools. Even if Xiashui No. 2 Middle School is in the county seat, it is really not much better in comparison. It is free and loose, and has something to do with the teacher's restraint, but more importantly, there is no goal. Basically, everyone, it's almost enough to move your body. Was patrolling the room with Yan Ning's gaze, and suddenly a boy near the fence of the playground came into her sight. Next to the green tree on the playground, a simple-skinned and dark-skinned boy is leaning on the trunk, holding a notebook in his hand, frowning, and lips moving slightly, seeming to be mumbling something. Yan Ning walked slowly in front of the boy and glanced at the notebook in the other's hand. The writing and drawing on it seemed to be class notes. Just about to speak, the boy who had been looking down at his notes suddenly raised his head, seeming to be taken aback by her, and hurriedly yelled, "Mr. Yan! Why is this?" Yan Ning asked with a stubborn mouth. That, review your notes." Yechin scratched his head, slightly embarrassed. He was yelled by Yu Hao in the queue. The classmates' eyes were a little strange, not to mention being hit by the physical education teacher. The opportunity to study in high school was hard-won. He didn't want to let it down. He could only seize the time and work hard as he could. To some extent, his inferiority complex and sensitivity made him seem a little uncomfortable, just as his desk mate Sun Yuguang was a bit uncomfortable with him, and he could feel it. The face of a young man, when really faced with some external opinions, it seems that it is not so able to hold it. I'm very hard-working. Yan Ning smiled, but didn't care too much. Students who can study freely in physical education classes, no matter what their grades are, at least this attitude is always good. But she is a physical education teacher after all, so she reminded her aloud, "This is my physical education class. For the big boys, relax first, move more, run, and play ball. It doesn't mean anything." Yechin raised his head and glanced at the playground seriously. Most of the boys in the class were in the basketball court. There were also some people in the badminton court. The others were all wandering around. He immediately shook his head. Ah! Yan Ning was slightly startled. She was a little awkward when she said that. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com looked up and down at Yechin. What's meaningless? It's... Yechin glanced at the playground again, and for a moment he really didn't know how to answer. Family reasons make the teenager sensitive and low self-esteem to a certain extent. The investment in learning made him realize that he is not the kind of particularly clever mind, but in some respects, he has his own pride. His physical fitness is very good. Among his peers, he has always been the one with the strongest strength, the fastest runner, and the highest jump. A dozen Li country roads can ride on a towing bar at a speed faster than others. Times, a farmer's busy working in the fields can withstand the labor of an adult. Is fighting. In Xiaoli's Township Middle School, he can fight 2 and 3 at one time. The records of several Xiaoli Middle School sports games are all his name. This kind of free activity physical education class really can't make Yechin lift up his spirits. What he is thinking about now is to study hard and work harder and more attentively. He has always been very sorry for not being able to enter Xiaoshui No. 1 middle school. Although his grandparents are still happy, he still feels guilty. If he played less then, he might be one middle school now. He still has such regrets when he doesn't want to take the university entrance examination. Teacher, don't ask. I just don't think these are very interesting, I don't want to move. Yechin was a little uncomfortable being stared at by Yan Ning, and he hurriedly dealt with it. Study is a good thing, but the physical education class should be moved by the activity, you know? I see, teacher, then I'm leaving now. Yechin rolled up the exercise book in his hand, tucked it in his trouser pocket, and hurriedly ran away from under Yan Ning's eyelids. Yan Ning looked at the boy's back, chuckled lightly, and walked towards the other students who were chatting under the shade of the tree. After the physical education get-out of class was over, Yechin went back to the classroom to ponder for a while. Although the content of the two classes this afternoon was not very thorough, his understanding was somewhat deepened. Thinking about self-study in the evening, if the teacher comes to ask if he should ask, but I also think about this idea. He is still not used to asking questions, so he will study it when he is preparing for the evening self-study. Closed the textbook, packed up his notes, got up from the position, Yechin checked the time, it was almost 5:30, almost ready to go to the cafeteria for dinner. Leaving the teaching building, the sky is not too dark at this time, but the whole campus has been deserted. It's still September. The time for evening self-study starts at 7:30 in the summer. The day students basically go home for dinner. Many boys and girls in boarding also go to the cafeteria to eat or go back to the dormitory to tidy up and go shopping. On the playground, except for a few people on the basketball court smashing the rim at random, there are only a few people on the side of the runway dangling. Yetchin didn't pay much attention either. After crossing a section of the runway, he was about to go to the cafeteria. Just a few steps away, he heard someone calling him from behind. Who? Yetchin, right, come here. Yetchin turned his head in some doubt, and saw a woman in sportswear standing among the boys, beckoning him. Teacher Yan, you call me? Yetchin turned around and walked in front of Yan Ning, looked at her, and then at the boys behind her. Unexpectedly, I saw a familiar face. Yetchin's next table, Yu Hao, who was very active in physical education class today, was the newly elected sports committee member in their class, with a whistle around his neck, and when he saw Yetchin appear, he grinned at him. Yes, right, do you have anything right now, how about coming to do me a favor? Yan Ning smiled and handed Yetchin a stopwatch, and pointed to the boys behind him. I want to test the sprint results of a few classmates. When you help me record it, will the stopwatch be used? Yes. Yetchin took the stopwatch, pressed it a few times, and nodded. The hand-timed stopwatch is not complicated. He helped the physical education teacher test other students when he was in the entrance examination. Anyway, it's still early, and it's not a big deal to be called to help by the teacher. That will do. Yan Ning smiled and nodded, then turned around and greeted the others, Li Jianchao, Lu Yijin, Fang Qiang, you guys are ready. Yetchin, you haven't left yet. Seeing Yan Ning turn to talk to a few other boys, Yu Hao pulled on his trouser belt and leaned in. Well, just going to eat, didn't you go home? Yetchin knew that Yu Hao was a day student and his home was in the county seat. Just after class, I saw Teacher Yan instructing a few people here to train. I followed over to take a look, and I was arrested. Yu Hao shrugged indifferently, it just so happens that I will go to the cafeteria for dinner with you. I heard from our school cafeteria. The food is not bad. The two chatted a few words in a low voice. A sturdy boy with a flat head and shorts in a tank top and shorts walked over, looked up and down at Yetchin, pointed to the stopwatch in his hand, and confessed, wait later. Wrong calculation. Who is he? Yetchin looked at the boy inexplicably walking up to him and said something, a little confused. Li Jianchao, sophomore in high school, we just give them a few tests. Yu Hao casually explained. Oh. Yetchin nodded. On the other side, seeing that the people were all ready, Yan Ning asked Yu Hao to stay at the starting line to blow his words, and then they walked to the finish line with Yetchin. The runway of Xiashui No. 2 Middle School is still a cinder runway. The 100-meter runway is very long, almost running through the east-west direction of the entire playground. At this section of the finish line, it may be because the cinder and loess on the runway have been mixed in because it has not been used for a long time. Together, they formed a tough piece. Yetchin reset the stopwatch, and Yu Hao before the starting line beckoned to be ready, put his thumb on the stopwatch button, ready to start at any time. Yan Ning was not at the finish line. Instead, he pulled a few tens of meters away from the runway, squatting slightly, which seemed to be a more comprehensive observation of the running movements of the next few people. Prepare. Before the starting line, Yu Hao watched everyone put on the starting position, learning the passwords from the physical education teacher in the junior high school. He also saw Yan Ning instructing a few sports students after the physical education get out of class, followed by to join in the fun, and then it was a matter of course that he was arrested. Beep. The clear whistle sounded. Before the starting line, the sound of rustling spikes rubbing against the ground suddenly sounded. On the 4, 5, 6, 3 runways, 3 figures galloped out, rushing to the finish line on the other side with fast steps. The distance of 100 meters was fleeting. Yetchin looked at the backs of a few people from far to near before the finish line, and quickly arrived in front of him. The stopwatch button in his hand was clicked at the moment when a few people crossed the line. Go down. What's your grade? After the 3 sports students crossed the finish line, they still ran forward more than 10 meters to buffer, the sophomore boy named Li Jianchao asked loudly. The fifth track is 12.13 seconds, the sixth track is 12.27 seconds, and the fourth track is 12.54. Yaqin glanced at the results on the stopwatch, and compared the numbers of several people and reported the results one by one. No way, I'm only 12 seconds 27. Hearing his own results, Li Jianchao cried out loudly in an instant, with an unbelievable look, staring at Yaqin with wide-eyed eyes. Did you make a mistake? I was only 12 seconds 27. Lu Yujin, he was 12 didn't make a second? How could this be possible? The boy named Lu Yujin stared at his messy hair and his face was unbelievable. He glanced at Yaqin, are you sure you didn't count it wrong? Also, there must be a problem. I won't talk about it myself. Lu Yujin must have gone in 12 seconds. Another boy named Fang Qiang in the fourth way was also shaking his head, don't count if you don't account, it ran away again in vain. Li Jianchao, if you don't wait for a while, don't run away, let's time the clock. We'll change people later. Let Teacher Yan do the calculations. I can't get the results alone. I don't know if I have touched the stopwatch when I come from this township. Li Jianchao touched his flat head, and then he muttered. No, you run slowly, what does it have to do with me? Yaqin was criticized by several people, and it became a bit angry in an instant. He felt very clearly that he pressed the timer the moment he heard the whistle, and the error would not be too great. And he was looking at the teacher, and he just came over to help. If this is not good, people will complain, and no one can accept it. What are you talking about? The sports student named Li Jianchao, his face sank instantly when he heard Yaqin's words, and walked in front of Yaqin. Who do you think runs slowly? That's right, what's the pretense, you come and have a look. The other Fang Qiang who ran away yelling for nothing also yelled. This set of tests is not particularly important. It is mainly after a summer vacation. Yan Ning wants to check their level and whether they have given up training during the summer vacation. Yaqin's timing results in this group are indeed not very good, but it is not something that anyone can despise. After all, some of them are considered the best in sports in Xiashui too. Moreover, several of them are practicing sports, and they have not done much with others before. Coupled with the superiority of the grade, it is really impossible for them to speak well. Your grades are just not good. Yaqin looked at a few people without showing any weakness. He didn't know much about sports students. At least he didn't recruit any sports students in Xiashui County in the high school entrance examination. But this result seems to make him really feel bad. After he entered high school, he studied quietly, but it was not that he had never fought and didn't cause trouble. It didn't mean he was afraid of trouble. In the past few years in the township middle schools of junior high schools, there have never been less gangsters who have been influenced by Hong Kong and Taiwan movies and videos. Pardon. Li Jianchao pointed at Yaqin in a posture that he was about to do something, and the boy named Fang Qiang behind him followed him a few steps forward. Only Lu Yujin, the best grader, frowned and said nothing. What are you yelling, don't you know how you just ran? At this moment, a voice came in. Yan Ning's eyebrows were upside down, pointing to the few people who had just finished the 100 meter run. A summer vacation has passed, let's see what it looks like. Lu Yujin, have you finished this trip? What about the last action to hit the line? There is Fang Qiang, what's wrong with your speed in the second half of the journey, you fell all at once. And Li Jianchao, how about your explosive power, you eat too much during the summer vacation, and you can't move your legs. Yan Ning suddenly yelled, and the few people present instantly went silent. Yaqin next to also had the feeling of knowing it for the first time. This kind-looking female teacher suddenly rushed forward, and she was really so powerful. Teacher Yan, let's time it. Lu Yujin, who had not spoken until now, suddenly said. Although he didn't say anything about Yaqin, he was obviously a little unhappy. Lu Yujin and Li Jianchao are both in the second year of high school. Fang Jiang is in the third year of high school. They have also practiced sports for a lot of time, so they think about going to the city to participate in the competition in some time and get a second-level athlete certificate or something. If they didn't train well during the summer vacation, they felt that their grades might have deteriorated, but in front of Yan Ning, everyone still wanted face, and a few words passed. But I didn't expect that this freshman in high school spoke so directly. Everyone was of a passionate age, and suddenly there was a smell of gunpowder. Okay, let's take a break, let me time it. Yan Ning didn't want to say anything more. Students of this age said it was easy to manage, or difficult to manage. A little trivial matter can be started with enthusiasm. She also knows that the stopwatch test is prone to errors, but because of the limited space, she does not have a lot of time. When thinking about this set of tests, by the way, look at the technical flaws of a few people. There are many things that I can't see during training, but the problems were exposed during testing or competitions. She was also able to address some weaknesses in time and let a few people strengthen them in a targeted manner. That. Yaqin, right. Yan Ning turned her head and looked at Yaqin, her expression calmed down. Why don't you go to dinner first? Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com, thank you. It's okay, teacher. Yaqin nodded, returning the stopwatch in his hand to Yan Ning, and didn't bother to deal with a few people. For a meal, I have to go back to the classroom and continue to do today's homework. When I study late, I can also preview the next courses. Hey, don't you go now. Yaqin turned his head and left, preparing to go to the cafeteria to eat, and Li Jianchao, who was also walking towards the starting line behind him, suddenly called out. Don't you say that we are not doing well, come on, let me see if you run. Li Jianchao, stop being wordy. Lu Yujin next to him gave a soft drink. Li Jianchao smiled, turning his head to seem to be talking to Lu Yujin. I don't understand those who don't hurt when standing and talking. We haven't encountered them before. Everyone thinks that they're really awesome. Enough. At the finish line, Yan Ning, who was watching a few people, gave a soft sigh. It's not over yet, right? Get ready and run again. But Yaqin stopped at this time and turned slowly, not looking at Li Jianchao's people, but slowly walked back to Yan Ning. Teacher Yan, I'll run with them too. Hey! Yan Ning was taken aback for a moment, then waved her hand. You ignore them, go eat. The few physical education students she brought are not really bad students, or they have anything to do with the in society, but they are strong, bad-tempered and occasionally fight with other students. Especially the one named Li Jianchao, who really owes his mouth. It's okay, Teacher Yan. I'll run and play. Yaqin smiled, I run very fast. Yaqin didn't wait for Yan Ning's answer, and walked directly along the track towards the starting line. Yan Ning looked at Yaqin's back, shook her head and smiled helplessly. She has a physical education background. It is very clear that the average student has undergone systematic training and no specific targeted training at all, and the gap between them is still very obvious. In addition to the poor performances of the Fangjiang in the third year of high school, Lu Yujin and Li Jianchao will have a chance to get the second-level athlete certificate after a systematic training. Most people usually watch TV and watch games, and often use the world's top level to measure the level of certain events, but in reality, even the level of second-level athletes who have just reached the threshold surpass most people. In small places like Xiashui County, there are too few people who systematically conduct sports training. Taking 100 meters as an example, high school students who can remember within 12 seconds are rare. The 3 years of high school to high school add up. There are only 1 or 2 people who are really talented. However, she also knows that young people of this age are impulsive, passionate, and unconvinced. If they are stimulated, they will definitely be unable to bear it. Since Yaqin wants to run, she has no objection. Just pay attention to wait for the conflict to intensify, and just get started. Before the starting line, Yu Hao looked at Ye Qin with an incredible expression on his face. Yep Qin, you want to run too? With them. Like Ye Qin's desk mate Sun Yuguang, he felt that Ye Qin should be a kind of nerd and didn't have much interest in sports. Why did he suddenly come out to run? He just blew the whistle at the starting line, 100 meters away, and didn't notice what happened to the finish line. This would just be a full of doubts. However, Ye Qin was already at the starting line before he asked more questions. Hi, what is that, Ye Qin, right? This run-up is for you. Lu Yujin took a run-up from the side of the runway and walked over. It turned out that there were 4 physical education students preparing for the test, but the other was a third year in high school like Fang Qiang. He was absent for some reason, so it happened to be used by Ye Qin. No need. Ye Qin shook his head. In junior high school, he also used a run-up device a few times, but it may be because of no professional training. Anyway, it was awkward to use. One time he ran a gym class and his feet slipped. Had. Standing next to him, Li Jianchao watched Ye Qin shook his head and refused, and chuckled. This is about to test the game, but he didn't talk as much as before. That's up to you. Lu Yujin put the run-up device behind Ye Qin, nodded, and didn't care. He has a good personality, and he is the only one who has not clashed with Ye Qin. Standing in front of the starting line, Ye Qin gently rubbed his feet down the track, frowning slightly. He was wearing a pair of somewhat old rebound shoes, and the anti-slip lines on the soles of his feet were smoothed out early. Simply walked aside and took off the shoes and socks, tucked the socks into the shoes and placed them next to the runway before walking back to the starting line again. Barefoot. Looking at Ye Qin's movements, the other 3 levels of Lu Yujin, Li Jianchao and Fang Qiang, who are in the 3rd grade, all showed a strange look. It's not that they have never seen running barefoot. They also ran occasionally in elementary and junior high school, but this is a cinder track. The soles of the feet really hurt when they run at full speed at 100 meters. Both feet stepped on the rough cinder track ground. Ye Qin took a breath, a long-lost sense of tension seemed to stir in his chest for an instant. Everyone is in place. Next to him, Yu Hao watched that the few people were basically ready, first waved to Yan Ning at the finish line, and then shouted to the people on the starting line. Lu Yujin, Li Jianchao and Fang Qiang, in their respective passes, leaned over, squatted, and made a starting position. Only Ye Qin next to him, separated his feet back and forth, opened his arms, and arched his body. They were still there. Standing. Hey, Ye Qin, what are you doing? Yu Hao was suddenly surprised. Standing? Isn't this a long-distance running? The other people who had leaned over and squatted down before the starting line were once again stunned when they watched Ye Qin's posture. Nowadays, in sprint competitions, few people use the standing start method anymore. The standing start is too low in starting reaction and starting acceleration efficiency. Generally, it is only used in complete amateur or training. In official competitions or tests, the squat start method is commonly used. Since the 1896 Athens Olympics, American track and field athlete Thomas Burke used a similar squat and squat starting method to win the 100 meter race championship in 12 seconds. In sprint events, the squat and squat starting method has been used. Repeated verification is the most effective starting position. Ye Qin had never used the squat and squat style starting method before in junior high school. Xiaoli Middle School only had 3 rusty run-ups. Except for a physical education class, they hadn't seen them before, let alone. The physical education teacher explained to everyone. A squat start without a running aid requires the athletes from decades ago to bring a small shovel and dig 2 shallow pits on the track to give strength to the feet. Although the junior high school of the township middle school has a physical education class, it really doesn't teach much about physical education. In the 50 METER test of the senior high school entrance examination, the starting posture adopted by the students is almost basically a standing start. Yechin once saw others start in a squat and leaning position, and he also pretended to learn twice. He always twisted and twisted. Either his body suddenly sank and fell, or he was a beat slower than others. He doesn't know much about the starting posture himself, so he is naturally comfortable now. Before the starting line, Li Jianchao screamed at Lu Yijin, seeming to say, "See you, this is a layman from the township middle school." And Lu Yijin could only shook his head gently, put Yechin away from his mind, and focused back on the runway. The grades in the group just now were too bad, and it has regressed a lot from last semester. This group can't do this anymore. Prepare you how dragged a long emphasis, just like many professional starters in competitions, shouting out the password. At the moment he finished shouting and preparing, he quickly put the whistle in his mouth, his expression faintly excited. Before the starting line, the three sports students moved in unison, changing from a squat to a half-arched starting position. Yechin was the only one who moved almost the same, his feet started working back and forth, his body protruding slightly, he looked like he was waiting for the whistle to sound. Beep. The clear whistle sounded again. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. Yechin felt that his reaction was slow, and the moment the whistle sounded, he was already moving. But in his ears, there was a sudden sound of screaming spikes rubbing against the cinder track. He almost didn't even look at it. He felt the silhouettes of the three sports students next to him suddenly jump out of him, moving incredibly fast. So fast. For an instant, Yechin was a little surprised. He still doesn't quite understand the difference between the starting method and the long-term starting training, but he just felt that looking at the few people who did not run well, the starting point was a bit unexpected. However, the game has already started and the finish line has not yet been reached. He is not a loser. Stuffed his head, desperately began to swing his arms to speed up. 30 meters ahead, Yechin speeded up desperately, but basically he could only look at the back of three sports students. Is almost 2 meters or 3 meters away from Lu Yijin, the fastest runner, and more than 1 meter away from Fang Qiang, the slowest runner. In just 100 meters, such a distance, it can almost be said that the winner has been locked in advance. Oh, I thought it was amazing. Yu Hao, who had finished blowing the starting whistle next to him, glanced at Yechin who had rushed out of the starting line. He was pulled 1 or 2 meters away, and he couldn't help but shook his head. When Yechin was about to compete with a few sports students, he thought that Yechin usually has nothing to do with the mountains. He really has 1 or 2 hands. But looking at it now, he is basically not much better than himself. No, it should be a lot worse than myself. Although he has not practiced track and field sprinting specifically, he is considered to be a good sportsman since junior high school. Otherwise, he would not be a sports committee member. Although he can't win, he won't be pulled a few meters away with one step.